Hey guys, welcome back to Van Builder HQ Live. Filming on the phone because I have a quick tip that I wanted to go through. It has to do with fabricating wood panels for 80/20. So we're going to flip the camera around here. And this is a panel that we're getting ready to put in our van build. If you guys missed out on the live stream, we installed the Flying Vanco rear tire carrier. But today what we're finishing up is this system. I've already fabricated this panel, and this panel, as you guys can see, and I'm thinking that doing a quick lesson on how I get all this stuff to line up would be helpful. So if you're constructing anything out of 80/20, you're eventually going to get to the point where you need to make panels so you can finish it off, make it look professional, enclose everything. And so this is the steps that I take. So first, what I do is I make sure that the cage or the frame that I make is, what it needs to be. And then I do that first. And then in my drawings, I will build out this section so that if I have something like this pull-out tray, when I end up, I have my 80/20 here, my panel, with whether it's a 1/2 inch or 3/4, 1/2 inch gap here so that or actually this needs to be more than that. And then whatever device I have that's permanently mounted. It could be a tray or anything like that, but let's go over here and get our little teaching tool. So this is just angle bracket just for visual purposes. But for example, let me put this in here. And then I'm going to get a tape measure. That way you guys can actually see the next steps here. Nova says hi. All right, let's see here. So we've got, this is our setup. Trying to get that in focus. Anyway, so we have our 80/20 behind here. So behind the scenes, you can see why this vent is in its location, because that's pretty much the only place I can vent the air out. So kind of keeping those things in mind is what you should consider. This is 3/4 inch panel. So we got 3/4 inch, as you can see right there, plus we've got 1, 2, exactly 3/4 for it to move in and out, which it doesn't need that. You could do a 1/4. You just need enough room for this panel to move out after you've unbolted it. I've actually designed this so that when you take the 6 bolts out, you can just slide it back and take it out. You don't have to take it out this way, in case you have something in front of it. This is a little bit of a odd situation because this is more for show-off purposes, so you guys can actually see the interior of the system. And if you guys are just seeing this for the first time, we have a 600 amp hour power system. We get our DC to DC chargers from Renogy. The acrylic lets us see the lights, the status lights. And then over here, this is something pretty cool. It's more just to nerd out on, but it's a circuit board that controls a thermostatically controlled switch that turns on these fans to cool this whole box down if it gets too hot. And then we've got our indicator window so we can see our updates on our inverter. And then we got our fuses and stuff like that. So that's kind of what that's for, just to show off. But getting back to this is how I map out, where this goes before I even build the power system. So before I built the power system, this tray is actually bolted through the van right here. You see the bolt? That's through the van chassis and through the van chassis. So I had to find out those hole locations before this whole entire thing even happened. So this was first, And then I just kind of reverse engineered the measurements going back, how big this box could be based on our width of our batteries. So we have our Renogy batteries in here. And so we've got a width on the batteries that is a standard width, which is from here to here. So let me get the tape measure out again. Okay, so the battery I think it was 11 inches, a little bit. And then I'm using the panel edge to hold in that first battery, and then the batteries at the end are all held in by this back panel. That's not the front to back movement. They're locked front to back with brackets, but the side to side is this panel and then the Adventure Wagon panel on the interior. So we first map out the frame. We got that checked off. We have our distance from a fixed component. This can be anything from a pull-out tray. You might have a fridge here. You might have gear storage. Mountain bikes are pretty popular. So that's your fixed measurement. And then you kind of go backwards based on your power system, how you want to line everything up, and go from there. All right, so we have all this set up. You guys can see with this bracket behind the scenes why everything is in this location, because it's impossible to go anywhere else. And then that's what we got. All right, so we're getting ready to go back up to the whole point of this. This panel back here is for the gasoline heater outlet in the back. We got our 120 volt breaker that's going to go there. And then this whole entire system will be complete. So next to the panels. So for the panels, you're going to make sure that you pre-drill these holes before you wrap them or paint them, because you need to make sure they're in the right location. It's impossible to do this after the fact. So you need to have precise measurements, and then you also need to take into consideration the thickness of your fabric, and then you'll need to remove that thickness of your fabric from your overall measurement. So let's get into this top panel. So this top panel is what we're finishing up, and this is going to be a short stream. This is just to capture this idea, not idea, but this kind of tutorial that was in my head. I thought was important before I move on, and you guys don't get to see this. So how do I locate where these screws go to bolt everything down so that they're nice and neat and look good? So I'll show you how I do it. So we need this bracket. Okay, so we're going to come over here to our piece of wood. So down here, let me flip this around. Okay, so right here is where we have our intake vent for the inverter. So it's going to go just like that. And what we've done here is we've measured the center to get this in there visually. And then we have our on and off button for that cool LED light that's in there. I'll show you in a second. But then notice how these are offset. Now, this extra part right here is because we have that 3/4 inch panel. So if we take this and we place it right here, you can kind of visually see where our tolerances come into play. So I'm going to move this so that I have 3/4 of an inch. And then on the back side, we're going to make sure we have 1/2 inch. So this is where this is where we have our panel gap. So we got a 3/4 inch panel here that we need to take into account, and we got a 1/2 inch panel here that we got to take into account. So our center line for the 80/20, as you guys can see, is obviously in the center line. And then over here, we're using this channel. So if you wanted to put a screw here, you couldn't do that. So you need to make sure, find out what you're using. So we're going to keep this long piece of 80/20 as what we bolt in for this panel. And then on this side, we're going to use this, which is 1/2 of an 1.5 inch, which is this 15 series. And this is going to be 3/4 of an inch off the side. Now, this sounds like double work, but this is the way I do it. So I cut the panel to the exact width of the box and exact depth of the box, including these side panels. I do that first. Then I'll come through and I'll measure all my offsets for my holes that I bolted down with. So this is 3/4. And then, I know this sounds like double work, but then I'll get my track saw back out and I'll come through and I'll just remove the thickness of the track saw blade from one side and from each side. Well, actually from one side on the front, one side on the back. I'll leave the front, and that's going to take away my thickness of my upholstery. I've tried it in the past where I try to get this lined up and I do 3/4 of an inch minus 1/8. And for whatever reason, it's just not as accurate. So it's okay to take off a little bit more, but your home location here for this hole is always going to be where the 80/20 is. It needs to be perfect. So if you take a little bit, maybe 1/8 of an inch off of this side, 1/8 here, 1/8 here, and 1/8 in the back for your upholstery, the upholstery thickness is going to take up that difference and you'll still be accurate. So that is my recommendation for locating these holes. So here you can see I've got my when I line this hole up, you'll notice that we're not at 3/4 anymore. We're 1/8 behind, and we're doing that because of our upholstered panel. So we have two things that are working against us. We have a 3/4 inch panel that's upholstered on the front, but then it lips over the back. So instead of a 3/4 inch panel, we have a 3/4 inch panel plus a 1/16 on the front and a 1/16 on the back, which means we have to remove 1/8 of an inch from this. And hopefully this is clear. So we are 1/8 of an inch back. And you're just going to have to play with that, because when you get everything finished, for over here you have 1/8 of an inch that's taken off, 1/16 on the front panel, 1/16 on the back because it's wrapped over the panel. On this side, you have the wall of the van. So this cannot be the exact width of the box, because you have to take off another 1/8 here. Then you have a panel that's wrapped front and back here. That's a 1/16 on the front, 1/16 on the back, with a 1/2 inch panel. So you kind of see how the reasons why I'll do a full measurement of the box, just cut this out rough, nice and clean. I'll line up all my holes, and then I'll come back and I'll shave these edges off, because it's just the easiest way I've found to do it. This is our vent plate, and we want to make sure that we center that so that it's perfectly center over the intake for the inverter. That way it cools it better. But what you're going to do is you're going to take this, kind of what I taught you here, and then you're going to apply that to the rest of the panel. So right here we've measured the center of the panel, and we've got 2 holes, and we just kept the same offset as our back hole, and then we've had this offset the same. And what I'm using to mark my holes is this punch down tool. So you just find your little X marks the spot, and this punch down will make it so that when you have your drill bit has something to follow, and it won't come off the side. Because if you miss, 80-20 doesn't give you any forgiveness. So that hole has to be exactly in the center of that line, or it's going to be a pain in the butt in the future when you need to take these panels out to do any maintenance. And then last but not least, we have the back here. And notice how we have it at 3/4 of an inch off the edge, because that's where our 80-20 is actually lined up. So when you do all that, you're ready to drill your holes. After you punch them down, go ahead and drill them out. You know, move the drill bit around, give you a little bit more of an opening to get you some movement. But after you finish that, the panel is either ready to paint and seal, if you're going to do that, or upholster. And that way, when you get to the point of putting the screws in, you'll just cut these little holes out with a little bit of a razor blade, and then you'll pop it back in, you know, put your socket head cap screws in, and you're good to go. So hopefully that gave you guys an idea of kind of the behind the scenes of how this type of panel is made if you're doing 80-20. If you guys have any questions, make sure you put those in the comments below. I'd be happy to answer them for you. And yeah, if you're doing a personal build, hope it's doing well. Make sure you guys are subscribed to the channel, like it, share the video if you know somebody's working on this same type of project. And also, don't forget to check out our DIY van build cheat sheet. Link in the description below. And we'll see you guys in the next live stream.